Rich man kicked his wife and child out of the house. Years later, he sees her on the cover of Forbes. Dear viewers, welcome to our channel. Subscribe to receive more stories every day. The sound of Jonathan's footsteps echoed through the marble hallway as he entered his penthouse apartment. He barely noticed the grandeur of his surroundings anymore. The high ceilings, the modern art adorning the walls, the floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the city skyline. To him, all of it felt like a distraction from the one thing he truly cared about: his relentless pursuit of success. Jonathan had built a life of luxury, but the foundation of his empire was fragile. His job as an investment banker consumed every ounce of his time and energy. To him, it was worth it, worth the sacrifice of sleep, relationships, and everything else that had once mattered. Yet, there was one thing he couldn't seem to shake off: his family. Emma was sitting at the dining room table, flipping through pages of a catalog, planning her boutique. Their son, Ethan, was playing with his toys on the living room floor, oblivious to the storm brewing in Jonathan's mind. "Jonathan, look at this fabric. Isn't it stunning?" Emma asked, holding up a swatch of material. Her voice was filled with excitement. She had been planning to open her boutique for years now, working on it every moment she could spare while raising Ethan. Jonathan glanced over, barely registering what she was saying. His thoughts were already miles away, on the deal he was trying to close at work, the investors he needed to impress, and the business dinners he couldn't afford to miss. "I don't have time for this, Emma," Jonathan snapped, his tone sharper than he intended. "This boutique dream of yours, it's not realistic. We need stability, not pipe dreams." Emma froze. She had grown used to Jonathan's distant attitude, but this was different. His words were cutting, and the coldness in his eyes made her feel small. "I've been working on this for years, Jonathan. It's not just a dream. It's my passion," she replied softly, trying to keep her voice steady. Jonathan slammed his briefcase onto the table, making Ethan jump. "Passion doesn't pay the bills, Emma. We're barely getting by as it is. I'm the one keeping this family afloat while you play pretend with your boutique ideas." Emma's heart sank. She had never seen Jonathan like this. He had always been ambitious, but this obsession with wealth had transformed him into someone she barely recognized. She stood up, determined to stand her ground. "Is this about money, Jonathan? Because we have enough to live comfortably. I just want to do something for myself, something that makes me feel alive." Her voice cracked with emotion. Jonathan shook his head, his expression hardening. "Enough for now. But what about the future, huh? Do you want Ethan to grow up in a household where his mother can't even contribute to the family? I'm working my ass off, and all you care about is some boutique that will probably fail." Emma felt the sting of his words, but she refused to back down. "I'm not asking for your permission, Jonathan. I'm going to open that boutique, whether you support me or not." Jonathan's face twisted with anger. He had always seen himself as the provider, the one who made the decisions. Emma's defiance felt like a betrayal, a challenge to his authority. In a moment of blind rage, he made the decision that would change everything. "Fine. If that's how you feel, then you can leave. Take Ethan and go. I don't need this distraction in my life anymore." He pointed toward the door, his voice cold and final. Emma stood there stunned. Her mind couldn't process the words fast enough. "You're kicking us out. Jonathan, this is our home." Jonathan crossed his arms, his face expressionless. "It's my home. You and Ethan can find somewhere else to live. I need to focus on my career, and I can't do that with you holding me back." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She picked up Ethan, who had been watching the argument unfold in confusion, and walked toward the door. With each step, the weight of Jonathan's betrayal sank deeper into her chest. As she stood in the doorway, she turned to face him one last time. "You'll regret this, Jonathan. One day, you'll realize what you've lost." Jonathan didn't respond. He simply turned away, his mind already racing with thoughts of work and success. He didn't have time for regrets. Outside, The night air was cool against Emma's skin as she held Ethan close. She had no idea where they would go or what they would do next, but one thing was clear. She was no longer the same woman who had walked into that apartment years ago. Jonathan had made his choice, and now it was time for her to make hers. Over the next few months, Emma struggled to rebuild her life. She found a small apartment on the outskirts of the city and threw herself into her work. With every rejection letter from investors and every failed pitch, she grew stronger, more determined to succeed. She poured her heart into her boutique, refusing to let Jonathan's cruel words define her. Ethan was her constant source of strength, reminding her why she was fighting so hard. She wanted to build something he could be proud of, something that would show him that they didn't need Jonathan's money or approval to thrive. Slowly but surely, things began to turn around. Emma's boutique, which started as a modest storefront, gained traction through word of mouth. Customers admired her unique eye for fashion and her passion for the business. One day, a local influencer discovered her shop, posting about it on social media. Within weeks, Emma's business exploded. By the end of the first year, Emma had expanded her boutique to 2 more locations, each more successful than the last. Investors began approaching her, recognizing her potential and offering her the capital she needed to take her business to the next level. Emma had transformed from a woman abandoned by her husband to a powerful entrepreneur. Yet, despite all her success, there was still a part of her that wondered if Jonathan had ever regretted his decision. She hadn't heard from him since the night he had kicked her and Ethan out. Her success grew exponentially, and soon Emma was in talks with major investors to take her brand nationwide. But as she signed the final paperwork, sealing a multimillion-dollar deal, Emma realized that it wasn't about proving Jonathan wrong anymore. It was about proving herself right. Emma's brand was no longer a local success. It had become a force of nature. Her boutique, now rebranded as Emma's Emporium, was the talk of the fashion world. What had started as a small venture had blossomed into a powerhouse with stores in multiple states, each one more profitable than the last. Emma was no longer the woman who Jonathan had abandoned. She was a self-made millionaire, a symbol of resilience, and the embodiment of what it meant to rise from the ashes. Her days were filled with meetings, press conferences, and expansion plans. Major magazines and media outlets were now calling her a visionary and one to watch. Even the most prestigious investors, the ones who had once rejected her, were lining up to partner with her. The empire she had built was both a testament to her perseverance and a middle finger to the man who had doubted her. Ethan, now 6 years old, had adjusted well to their new life. He adored his mother, watching her with admiration as she juggled motherhood and the demands of her booming business. Emma had made sure that, despite her success, Ethan would always come first. No business deal, no magazine cover, and no investor meeting could ever compare to her son's smile. She was determined that Ethan would never feel the absence of his father's love. But Jonathan's presence still lingered in her mind, not as a source of pain but as a reminder of her strength. She no longer needed his approval, and she certainly didn't need his money. Yet, there was a part of her that still wondered what he was doing, if he had ever regretted his decision to kick them out. Her question would soon be answered. One brisk morning, as Emma sipped her coffee and scrolled through her emails, a message caught her eye. It was from Forbes. An invitation for an exclusive interview. They wanted to feature her on the cover of their upcoming issue, highlighting her as one of the most influential women in business. Emma smiled as she read the email, the magnitude of it settling in. This was the pinnacle of success, the ultimate validation. As the interview date approached, Emma couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. Not for the fame, not for the fortune, but for the journey. She had built something incredible from nothing, and she had done it on her own terms. Now the world would see just how far she had come. The day of the interview was surreal. Emma arrived at Forbes headquarters in New York City, where a team of photographers, makeup artists, and journalists awaited her. The cover shoot was glamorous. Draped in high-end fashion, Emma exuded confidence. But it wasn't the expensive clothes or the makeup that made her glow. It was the knowledge that she had earned her place there. During the interview, she spoke about the challenges she had faced, the sacrifices she had made, and the people who had doubted her along the way. She didn't mention Jonathan by name, but the memory of him still lingered in the back of her mind as she shared her story. Her triumphs, her failures, and her ultimate rise to success. All of it was captured in the pages of the magazine. Weeks later, the issue hit the stands, and Emma's face graced the cover. She held the magazine in her hands, flipping through the pages with a mix of pride and disbelief. This was her moment, a moment she had earned through sheer willpower and determination. She placed the magazine on the kitchen counter and called Ethan over. He beamed with pride when he saw his mother on the cover. "Look, Ethan," Emma said, smiling down at him. "That's Mommy." Ethan's eyes widened in amazement. "Wow, Mommy, you're famous." Emma laughed, ruffling his hair. "Not famous, sweetheart. Just very, very determined." Meanwhile, across the city, Jonathan sat in his corner office, overlooking the financial district. He had risen to a high position in his firm, but things hadn't gone as smoothly as he had imagined. His personal life was a wreck. His second marriage had fallen apart, and his financial situation was not as stable as it once had been. His once confident stride had been replaced with a slow, contemplative walk. The world that he had built around himself was crumbling, and Jonathan was starting to realize that the emptiness he felt wasn't just about money. There was something missing, something he had walked away from all those years ago. As he sifted through paperwork on his desk, his assistant knocked on the door, holding a fresh copy of Forbes magazine. "Mr. Dawson," she said, setting the magazine down. "You'll want to see this." Jonathan glanced at the magazine without much interest, but when his eyes caught the cover, his heart stopped. There, staring back at him, was Emma. Emma, the woman he had abandoned. And next to her in bold letters were the words, "From rags to riches. Emma Dawson's rise to power." He couldn't believe what he was seeing. The woman he had kicked out of his home, the woman he had dismissed as a failure, was now on the cover of Forbes. And not just any cover. This was a feature celebrating her as one of the most successful entrepreneurs of the decade. Jonathan felt a lump form in his throat as he flipped through the pages. There she was, dressed in high-end fashion, smiling confidently. Her story laid out in intricate detail. As he read about her journey, about how she had built her empire from scratch, he felt a wave of regret wash over him. How could he have been so blind? He had walked away from the one person who had believed in him, the one person who had loved him unconditionally. And now, she was the one standing on top of the world, while he was left behind in the wreckage of his own greed. But as Jonathan continued to read, something else caught his eye. A small note at the end of the article, a mention of Ethan, their son. He hadn't seen Ethan in years, and the realization hit him like a freight train. Not only had he abandoned Emma, but he had abandoned his own child, the one person who had looked up to him. Suddenly, the success he had chased all his life felt hollow. The money, the power, the status, it all meant nothing compared to the family he had thrown away. He had lost everything that truly mattered, and now, as he sat in his empty office, the weight of his choices pressed down on him like a boulder. Jonathan knew he had to see Emma. He had to apologize to make things right, if that was even possible. But deep down, he knew that no amount of apologies could fix the damage he had caused. Still, he had to try. Emma was in her office, going over expansion plans for her brand, when her phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. Hesitating for a moment, she answered. "Emma, it's Jonathan." Her heart skipped a beat at the sound of his voice. She hadn't heard from him in years, and the flood of emotions hit her all at once. Anger, sadness, and a faint trace of nostalgia. "Jonathan, what do you want?" she asked, her voice steady but guarded. "I saw the Forbes cover," Jonathan began, his voice filled with regret. "Emma, I made a mistake. I never should have let you and Ethan go. I realize now what I lost and... sorry. I'm so sorry." Emma remained silent for a moment, her mind racing. This was the apology she had wanted years ago, but now, standing on the other side of success, She wasn't sure it even mattered anymore. "Jonathan," she said quietly, "I don't need your apology. I built this life without you. Ethan and we're doing just fine. You made your choice, and now you have to live with it." Jonathan's heart sank as he listened to Emma's calm but resolute words. He had imagined this conversation going differently. In his mind, Emma would hear his apology, forgive him, and maybe they could find some way to reconnect, even if just for Ethan's sake. But her response made it clear that the past was just that. The past, and there was no going back. "Emma, please," Jonathan stammered, his voice cracking slightly. "I know I've messed up. I know I've lost everything that mattered, but I just want to see Ethan. Can't we talk? Maybe?" "No," Emma cut him off, her voice firm now. "You don't get to walk back into our lives just because you regret your choices. Ethan doesn't even know who you are, Jonathan. You left when he was too young to remember. Do you have any idea what it was like, raising him alone, building this business from nothing while making sure he never felt the absence of a father?" Jonathan remained silent. He didn't have a defense. He couldn't. "It wasn't easy," Emma continued, her voice softening just a little. "But we did it. I did it. Without you. And honestly, I'm glad you left. Because it made me realize that Ethan and I are better off without you." Jonathan felt as though the floor had dropped out from beneath him. Her words, though spoken calmly, cut deeper than anything he had ever experienced. He had spent years climbing the corporate ladder, sacrificing everything for success, and now he was realizing that it had all been for nothing. The wealth, the status, the power, it all felt empty compared to what he had lost. "Can I at least see him?" Jonathan pleaded, his voice breaking. "I just want to see my son." Emma hesitated, her maternal instincts warring with her anger. She had always protected Ethan from the pain of knowing his father had abandoned them. She had built a life where Ethan didn't need Jonathan, but now, hearing the desperation in Jonathan's voice, she wondered if maybe Ethan deserved to make that choice for himself. "I'll ask him," Emma finally said, her tone neutral. "But it's his decision, not yours. And if he doesn't want to see you, you'll have to respect that." Jonathan nodded, though she couldn't see it through the phone. "Thank you," he whispered. It was all he could say. Later that evening, Emma sat down with Ethan at their kitchen table. He was playing with a new Lego set. His face scrunched up in concentration as he tried to figure out how to build a complex structure. Emma watched him for a moment, her heart swelling with love. Ethan had grown into a kind, intelligent, and resilient boy. He was her greatest achievement. "Ethan, can we talk for a second?" Emma asked gently. Ethan looked up, his brown eyes curious. "What's up?" Emma took a deep breath, unsure of how to explain. "Your father, Jonathan, he called me today. He wants to see you." Ethan blinked, his expression confused. "Jonathan? You mean Dad?" Emma nodded, her heart aching. "Yes, your dad. He saw the Forbes article and... well, he said he wants to see you. But it's completely up to you, Ethan. You don't have to if you don't want to. I'll support whatever you decide." Ethan stared down at his Legos, deep in thought. "I don't know, Mom," he said quietly. "I've never really thought about him. You've always been enough for me. Why does he want to see me now?" Emma reached out and stroked Ethan's hair gently. "I think he regrets what he did. He knows he made a mistake by leaving us, and now he wants to make amends. But you don't owe him anything, Ethan. You've done just fine without him, and you don't have to see him if you don't want to." Ethan nodded, still looking down at his Legos. I think I'd like to meet him, just once, to see who he is. But I don't want him in our lives if he's just going to leave again." Emma's heart broke at the maturity in her son's voice. He was only 6 years old, but already he was grappling with the kind of emotional complexity that most adults struggled with. She leaned down and kissed the top of his head. "I'll arrange it, sweetheart. And I'll be right there with you the whole time." The next day, Emma called Jonathan and arranged for him to meet Ethan at a cafe near their home. She chose a public place, somewhere neutral where she could control the situation if things got uncomfortable. Jonathan agreed. his voice filled with a mix of hope and apprehension. When the day arrived, Emma and Ethan arrived at the cafe early. Ethan was nervous, fidgeting with his shirt and looking around anxiously. Emma knelt down in front of him, cupping his face in her hands. "Remember, Ethan, you don't have to do anything you're not comfortable with. I'm right here with you." Ethan nodded, taking a deep breath. A few minutes later, Jonathan walked in. He looked older than Emma remembered. His hair was streaked with gray, and the sharp lines of his face had softened with age and stress. His eyes darted around the room until they landed on Emma and Ethan. For a moment, Jonathan stood frozen, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Slowly, he approached the table. "Hi," he said awkwardly, his voice barely above a whisper. Ethan looked up at him, his expression a mix of curiosity and apprehension. "Hi." Jonathan swallowed hard, unsure of what to say. He had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but now that it was happening, he was at a loss for words. "I'm your dad," he said lamely, immediately regretting how pathetic it sounded. Ethan nodded but said nothing. He simply studied Jonathan with those sharp brown eyes that reminded Jonathan so much of Emma. "Can I sit?" Jonathan asked, glancing at Emma. "Go ahead," she replied, her voice neutral. Jonathan sat down, his hands trembling slightly. He had faced down corporate boardrooms, closed million-dollar deals, and handled some of the toughest negotiations in the world. But nothing compared to the pressure of sitting across from his son, the boy he had abandoned. "I don't know what to say," Jonathan admitted, his voice shaking. "I know I've made mistakes. I know I wasn't there for you or your mom, and I'm sorry for that more than you can imagine. But I want to try to be better, to be here for you now if you'll let me." Ethan stared at him for a long moment, his small hands fiddling with his napkin. Finally he spoke. "Why did you leave us?" The question hit Jonathan like a punch to the gut. He had known it was coming, but hearing it from Ethan's innocent voice made it all the more painful. He wanted to offer some grand explanation, to give Ethan a reason that would make sense. But the truth was, there was no good reason. "I was selfish," Jonathan said, his voice thick with emotion. "I thought that chasing success, chasing money was the most important thing. And I didn't realize what I was losing until it was too late." Ethan nodded slowly, processing Jonathan's words. "Mom said you didn't want us." Jonathan's eyes filled with tears. "That's not true, Ethan. I was stupid and I didn't see how much you and your mom meant to me. But I've spent every day since then regretting what I did." Ethan's eyes met Jonathan's, and for the first time, Jonathan saw a flicker of understanding. "I don't hate you," Ethan said quietly. "But I don't need you either." Jonathan's heart shattered. He had come here hoping for some kind of reconciliation, but Ethan's words made it clear that he had been replaced, that his absence had left a hole that was now filled by Emma's love and care. "I understand," Jonathan whispered, his voice breaking. Emma watched the exchange, her emotions a whirlwind. She had wanted this moment for Ethan, a chance for him to meet his father and ask the questions he had always wondered about. But now, seeing the pain in Jonathan's eyes, she felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. The meeting ended quietly. Jonathan left the cafe with a heavy heart, knowing that he could never undo the damage he had caused. Emma and Ethan went home, stronger than ever, knowing that they didn't need Jonathan's presence to complete their family. As they walked back to their car, Ethan held his mother's hand tightly. "I love you, Mom," he said softly. "I love you too, Ethan," Emma replied, her heart swelling with pride. "We're going to be just fine." And they were. Emma's business continued to flourish, and she and Ethan grew closer with each passing day. The past was behind them, and the future was theirs to build together. Jonathan, on the other hand, would spend the rest of his life living with the regret of his choices, knowing that his greed had cost him the one thing that truly mattered: his family. Dear viewers, thank you for watching. If you like this story, please subscribe to our channel to receive more stories every day. Share with us what you think of this story.